Cool. So this is episode 1 of the Be Yourself, Do It Yourself podcast presented by the 914 Collective. I am your host, AJ Chiarella, and I will be speaking with community-driven people about their relationships with DIY or do-it-yourself culture. Basically, I just want to talk to people that are doing cool things because they want to be. And this first week is going to be really awesome. I have a great guest, one of my close friends, Mike Terry of the Jukebox Romantics. He's the man. Terry, we talk a lot about it in here, but Terry does a bit of everything. He's plays in a punk band. He has his own podcast. He is a bartender. He books tours. He does everything. He's a real do-it-yourself kind of guy. He's been doing the thing for a long, long time. Someone I've definitely looked up to as someone who's just been active in, especially in the Westchester County music scene for a long time. Terry's a great guy. Jukebox Romantics are a great band. So yeah, if you're listening to this, I appreciate you listening to the first episode. That means a lot. Please subscribe to this wherever you want to listen, whether you're listening on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, and it'll definitely help us out. I'm going to be doing these every single week. As of now, it looks like I will be going live with them on Sundays, and I'll be uploading them on Mondays. So they'll be there for the morning commute for anyone that has a Monday through Friday gig. Even though I know we are in times that normalcy isn't exactly prevalent, and not a lot of people are getting up at Monday morning. And just to timestamp this, today is July 5th, 2020, because I know these things end up being on the internet forever. And I say that because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and life has just been kind of weird for a couple months. So I think that's definitely interesting. And Terry and I talk a little bit about that in this conversation, but I think it's definitely something interesting to keep in mind in case for some reason you're listening to this in 2040 and you have no idea what I'm talking about. So, yeah, I'm really excited about this. Again, thank you if you're watching. Thank you if you're listening. If you want to support the podcast, please subscribe. I run a music collective called the 914 Collective. And when I say music collective, I should just say art collective in general. And I just really would focus on creating a cool art and music community in Westchester. And this is just kind of the new adventure into that. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to be here. With that being said, I think it's time to jump into the conversation with Mike Terry of the Jukebox Romantics. Enjoy, and if you're watching live and want to hang out and talk in the chat, I will be here. Cheers. Start recording here. And okay, so that's recording. And let's start recording here. All right, we are live. We are recording. All right. Bear with me.
Hold on, can you hear all that in the background or no?
Sorry. Nah, it's all good. Whatever. Okay. All right. So we're here. Mike Terry, my boy. Episode
Hello.
1. Episode 1 of the Be Yourself, Do It Yourself podcast. Thanks for being here, bro.
BYDIY.
You already know, dude. I am excited to get into this, and I'm excited that you are my first person to do this with, because I feel like I can talk to you for hours.
I am honored and humbled, and I appreciate being guest number 1 on Be Yourself, Do It Yourself. And I think that's pretty cool that you're jumping into the podcast world. I think it's pretty awesome. And I know that I could talk for hours, but don't let me, because podcasts get boring after like an hour 20.
Well, we'll see what happens. I feel like me and you get on the phone and we just talk for like 3 hours usually.
No, I know, but
so this isn't gonna
nobody wants to hear of that unless we're going into a deep dive about like JFK assassination.
All right, so I was thinking we would take it back a little bit to because you're all over the map, dude. Like when we talk about do it yourself, like you do a lot of things. You are playing a band, you do a podcast, you book tours, you are a bartender, you do a bunch of cool stuff. But
so should I like do like an? Like, you okay in there? Don't do anything. I got it. So sorry about that.
It's all good.
My girlfriend is breaking things. She's in the kitchen and she's never there. We don't believe in gender roles, so she's never in there.
Good. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah. So I guess I introduce myself. I don't know if you're going to introduce me before the show starts. I don't know your format. It's episode 1. Anything else?
Dude, it's episode 1. I'm definitely going to introduce you before the show. Everyone will know who you are. But I figured we take it back to you as a kid. It's like when you were younger, what kind of kid were you? Like were you the like I'm gonna go do things for myself, or did it take like finding a specific thing like music to like kind of push you to that?
I mean, I was definitely one of those kids, depending on how far back we're going. I'm definitely one of those kids who are like friends with everybody. So I had like a core group of friends from like starting in kindergarten and moved all the way till now. Still have the same 3 friends since back then, and then grabbed friends along the way from the neighborhood. I grew up in Dobbs Ferry, New York, part of Westchester County. It's like a river town, and basically, I do kid things. We organize. I guess the first things that we started organizing was me and my sister would organize neighborhood capture the flag games and stuff like that, like manhunt when we were like 8, 9. Build trails in the woods, bike trails, like kids stuff like that.
Sounds about right.
And then the music thing started because to just move into music, which is like basically my whole life since 14, was we were doing backyard wrestling, which I didn't start. My buddy Dan, who I actually do my own podcast with, the Rudu Cast for anybody listening or watching. I'll plug it at the end. But he had a wrestling organization with his friend. They were 2 years younger. So I was like in 8th grade and they were in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. And it was like during the pro wrestling boom. So like NWO, like Degeneration X, like 1998, 99. And they were organizing like backyard wrestling. And it was like pretty, like for a bunch of, like for kids younger, like 2 years younger, it was like very organized. Like they had scripts, they had a magazine, they were like super DIY about it. Mm-hmm. And I was just coming in and being like, I just want to wrestle, but then like once I got involved, like I really wanted it to be about like quality of like, how good can we make this look? Because they filmed everything. So basically we would wrestle every Saturday. We'd film, we'd have like announcers, and then we'd go back into the house. This is in Dobbs Ferry. And then there would be like 20, 30 kids, and like the whole neighborhood would watch from like their windows, because it was like an apartment complex. There was like this patch of grass that we turned into a ring using like, we used dumpsters as an entranceway, all this sort of stuff. But basically we were just kind of like building our own wrestling federation. And out of that, we all started bands together because we were all really into the same like music with like pop punk and new metal and stuff.
Cool.
So I guess as a kid, I mean, that was probably some of the first like stuff I was doing on my own, was like, normal kid stuff, like playing games that you're taught from somebody else, like capture the flag, to like building a fort and like making like a dirt bike track, to like then, backyard wrestling, which was very much just imaginative, do-it-yourself sort of shit.
Which is funny because I feel like I've talked to you so much about so many things, and I've never talked to you about backyard wrestling. Like, I obviously know you're super into wrestling, and I was too as a kid, but like I've never heard that story.
Yeah, so we were called KWF, Kids Wrestling Federation. We have a website. You can actually find it on the Wayback Machine. Like on I don't know if you I don't know if you ever got on the Wayback Machine.
I
On
have
like
it.
so it's basically like an internet search engine where you could pull up your old websites from when you were younger.
Oh
So like
wow, are
so like
MySpace is on there?
MySpace is not on there.
Ah, damn.
But like so like my first band was called Foul Mouth, and we had an Angel Fire website. So it's angelfire.com/ny5/foulmouth.
Hmm.
And I looked it up like a month or two ago because I basically found like a big box of like old pictures. So it's like, oh, I wonder if the website is anywhere. And like the Wayback Machine, which I guess it's probably owned by Google at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically like an internet archive. And so our first website's on there and everything is there, like the news, like the blog, like the
That's
links.
sick, dude.
The shit that's not there though is like there's no photos. All the links are broken to the photos because it's so
Alright.
long ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But like the wrestling, they had a wrestling site. Everybody was making websites in like 1997. That was like 90, 97, 98. That was like what you went to when you were in school. Like you were learning how to do PowerPoint and make like HTML websites.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
so
which is crazy. I mean, because I feel like now it's so there's just you just use a thing like Squarespace or Wix to make a website.
right. I know it's funny. It was harder back then, but I feel like Wix and Squarespace, it's almost harder now. Probably because there's so like, but it's the same thing. It just looks nicer.
Yeah.
Back then, you needed to know all the HTML. I don't know. I don't do anything with our websites band wise. So, but like, I'm assuming everything's like almost drag and drop now.
Yeah. Dude, it's everything's drag and drop. You can just use templates. Like this
Yeah.
one.
So, I mean, think about it. Like back then, it was like, oh, I'm making a website for like a backyard wrestling thing.
It was real
Like,
DIY.
Yeah. Like, it's like, how do you do this? You're like, all right, well, what did I learn in school? There was no like, like there was no like real like doing it like that. But yeah, so like, it was all kind of birthed out of like, random kid shit in the neighborhood. Like we were very lucky to live in like a cool neighborhood with
Mhm.
lots of kids, and I was cool with talking to people like all sorts of ages. Like our first band, like I was the oldest person in the band by like 2 years, and it was like, what do you? It was basically just finding people who played instruments. It didn't care what they listened to,
Right.
but I was definitely like, we were definitely pushing like the like pop punk metal thing.
So what started music for you? Did you pick up a guitar first? Was that the first
Yeah,
thing?
so there was a there was a website called punkrockvids.com.
Okay.
And I was really into Blink 182. This is like 1998.
Everyone around our age, I feel like it was either Green Day or Blink 182 that got you into
I
it.
had heard Green Day in like second grade, so like 1993, and I didn't like it. And then in '95, somebody gave me a cassette of Blink 182 of Buddha, and I fucking hated it. I listened to like straight up like No Mercy, like the stuff I listened to was like Alice DJ, like 90s dance pop, and like Boys to Men and Puff Daddy and Biggie and all that, and like until like 95. And then I got into No Doubt. The first concert I went to was No Doubt and Weezer.
Sick.
And we left before even Weezer went on. We just went for No Doubt. Somebody drove us. It was a school night. It was fifth grade. We saw No Doubt. And actually, I found out recently from a buddy's podcast, the Talk Music to Me guys, that
Love them.
Suicide Machines were on that tour, and I had no idea.
Oh,
So,
yeah?
Yeah, so like I was so young, I don't remember. I remember going to the concert. And I remember seeing No Doubt, and I remember leaving to like go home because we had to go home early because it was like a school night, and it was Long Island. Was like when you're in fifth grade, Long Island's like 10 hours away or whatever
Yeah,
from
right.
Westchester. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean that's kind of how I got into punk. I basically liked No Doubt, and then I was listening to like hip hop and pop music like Britney Spears, and I remember Nobody Beats the Wiz was on Central Avenue in Scarsdale, Yonkers. It was it's basically like Best Buy.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like Circuit City, Best Buy. Yeah.
Sears. It was like one of those stores. I think they were regional. So anybody listening to this who's not from here, just picture like a Best Buy back then, but very music based. And I remember I bought Pennywise Unknown Road. I was already into Blink 182 at this point. So basically, Blink 182 in their liner notes would write like all the bands that they were thanking and influenced.
Uh-huh.
So that's how I found out about like Pennywise, Strung Out, and all those kind of bands. So I basically went to the store and bought those records. So I bought Unknown Road, Pennywise, a Strung Out record, No Effects, So Long, Thanks for All the Shoes, and that's kind of how I got into punk.
Right.
But I wasn't playing an instrument yet. I then finally saw a video of Blink-182 playing live in like 97, 98, right when I was getting into these CDs that cost like forever. Like CDs cost so much money back then. I think I spent like $60 on 3 CDs.
Dude, I remember those days.
Dude, like it was like birthday money. Like I got Britney Spears, SR-71. Like I think I spent like $80 on like 5. I remember specifically the records I got, and it had to be more than like $60.
Yeah.
So saw some videos and I was just like, that looks fun. How do I do that? Like, how do I get to do that? So, and I was like, oh, I need a guitar. So like, that's how I do that.
Cool.
Like it was not about writing music or like my feelings or anything like that.
How old were you here at this point?
8th grade. So however old you are in
like
8th grade.
13, 14. Okay, cool.
So right exactly like the second year of doing the backyard wrestling thing, it was kind of like, we weren't taking it so seriously, the wrestling thing. Like we were very serious about how we did it professionally, like as professional as you could be at that age. You know, we weren't making money off of it, but we definitely had people watching, and we were like had videos and magazines, and we were being super whatever. We were definitely putting time into it. But it was like the next step was like, oh, like music looks really fun.
Right.
And my buddy Dan, who was one of the people who started the wrestling thing, he was really into music also, and he played guitar. He played guitar since he was like real young. So there was guitars in his house, and we would like play guitars while watching back the wrestling videos that we made.
Nice.
And so we were like, why don't we start a band? And we started a band with like, it was a bunch of people from his grade, and I think it took a while. It wasn't like right away. Like I got a guitar for like 8th grade into 9th grade, and I didn't play it at all. Like I hated it. I didn't know what I was doing. And then I learned how to play like Teen Spirit by Nirvana and Damn It. And like, then I just started playing along to like all of the Mark, Tom, and Travis show and learned how to read tabs.
Nice.
And then I got to a point where I was like, I think I could play with a band.
Yep.
Fuck it. And yeah, we started the band. It was called Foul Mouth. And as DIY as it can get, other than when your parents had to drive you to band practice. When we weren't walking there, we were getting driven. Because like Dobbs Ferry is all hills, kind of like Yonkers. So like it was like I lived on the other side of town. And we started practicing. We just started learning covers. We wrote like some songs. And then after like 6 months, we went into like a really, really, really professional studio in Dobbs that's still there.
Oh, the music store?
It was called Stolen Moments back then. But it's the same people. It's the music store. They owned it. Dude, they just changed the name.
My band, when I was 12, we recorded our first demo in that studio.
Really?
Yeah. What was the guy's name? Do you remember the guy's name that recorded you? The guy that recorded us, his name was Gary.
Yeah, so Gary recorded everybody later on. He kind of looked like a troll.
Dude, wait, hold on. It's hilarious that you just said that, because we had a song called Gary the Troll that we wrote about him after we left the studio. So it's hysterical that you just said that he looks like a troll, because that was like our big song after. It was called Gary the Troll. And it was
I'm sure everybody had a Gary the Troll song. And it's funny because like we used to hang out on that street. So we hung out on the street as kids. We would sit outside. Eventually we would do stupid kid things like, smoking cigarettes and just hanging out over there. There was a bodega there called Madaba that we used to just go hang out at. And like when we were in school, we were allowed out for lunch. So we would go out for lunch and just hang out there. And basically we recorded there. It cost us like $600. It was not mixed at all. We didn't know anything about mixing. He did it on Pro Tools, like the first Pro Tools, I think. Wow. Maybe. And it was an awesome experience. We felt like big shit, and it was a lot of money to us.
It's a super nice studio. They had the drum room, and then they had the live room. Like we tracked our stuff live. I don't know if you guys did the same, but we tracked.
Of course we did.
We just tracked it live, which is what you thought. Like as a kid, I thought that's what you did at a studio. I don't think I've maybe done that one other time since then.
For the longest time, we did. Like after that band, I was in another band, and we recorded a demo there also. and we did it mostly live. We did like drums and guitars together, and it sounded a lot better. But like, yeah, dude. And then we realized that like it was just a really expensive studio, and there was like cheaper places to go.
Yeah.
And that's how we found Small Room with Ant in Yonkers.
Love it.
And like,
Shout out.
it's just kind of funny, you know. And we knew about Nada recording, which is like where our band records now. We knew about it years ago because John was doing it in his mom's basement, and he was doing like the Autopilot Off records and Matchbook Romance records and
That's awesome.
My Chemical Romance shit out of his mom's basement, you know.
Wow.
And so like it was one of those things like, oh, we just can't afford it, and it probably wasn't that expensive. It was just like, why spend that much when I just got this MacBook. It's 2004, and I got a Mac G5, and I could just record using GarageBand, and we'll just use the internal speaker, and it's street punk, so fuck it.
Yeah. Right.
And we'll press our own CDs. You know, we always just CD stomped everything. Sit there all night long stomping the CDs, like, you know, mailing lists, all that shit. So it kind of started, you know, not to, you know, ramble, but it started from, you know, the pro wrestling or the backyard wrestling into, you know, wanting to do more and seeing how much fun it was on stage and realizing that you needed a guitar to do that. And then it became songwriting. Like I'm a pretty emotional guy. So
Yeah.
it was very quickly into that. And our first demo with that first band in 2000 was we covered M&M's by Blink. It's on the recording.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did like 5 original songs that were like pretty terrible. Like, you know, they were about like, I think just to show you how like white kid Westchester it was, like our drummer was, his dad was really big advertising rep for Coca-Cola. His dad invented the Coca-Cola polar bears and like the Coca-Cola penguins.
Oh, really?
You might be a little young, but like it was like a big ads thing.
I
So they were
remember
loaded.
the polar bears.
And they had like a housekeeper who like like a live-in nanny from like Ecuador. And like we wrote a song about her moving back to Ecuador. Like it was like we wrote songs about cutting class and like
Yeah,
stupid kid shit. Like it was
That's awesome.
it didn't sound terrible because of the studio it was at, but it probably is unlistenable for me now. but it's probably better than a lot of recordings that I've heard bands that are professional do, which is funny.
So this is like, well, that's funny also because this is the DIY. We're talking about DIY, and like we're cut from the same cloth, and I think a lot of people that are in like the punk rock community and are cut from that cloth, which is just like you start a band because like it's a fun thing to do, and you saw the electric guitar or Green Day or Blink-182 and you thought it was cool, and then all the other DIY stuff, like it just forms through this like
It forms through like this. It forms through like it kind of forms through like the how do we do it thing.
Yeah. How do I do? I can't afford to go to the studio, but I do have a MacBook.
But it was also different too, though, because it was like we didn't have a MacBook at first. There was no computers like that.
Right.
So it was 2000. So like it was like we go to a recording studio because that's where you record things. It wasn't like let's do it at home.
No. Yeah,
But then when we got the master, which we had no idea what the fuck a master was, it was like, all right, how do we make CDs? So like, oh, my computer has a CD burner, so we just burn CDs.
Right.
And then after a little bit, you'd be like, oh, like you can make your own jewel cases and print this shit out. And it was all DIY because we didn't know. It wasn't like you can Google and be like, oh, I can send it to this company and they print out really nice things.
Dude, yes.
You know, and it's 2000, 2001. So the music industry didn't collapse yet. So like CDs weren't cheap either. Like you can get a stack of CDs for cheap,
Right.
but like in the grand scheme of things, like I remember getting 200 CDs and it costing $157, like, you know, or maybe more than that, you know, with cases and everything. If you get a stack of CDs now, they're like 20 cents each, maybe, you know? So it's like,
yeah, it's insane, dude.
it was DIY because it had to be, because nobody told us how to do it. And like my buddy Dan, who we started the band, like he played guitar because his dad played guitar.
Uh-huh.
So like that's how he got into it. And he came from a very musical family, whereas my family was very like not that. They were very much like business, working class, like, you know, we'll go on vacations kind of thing if we can. You know,
I was somewhere in the middle.
You know, like we were like suburban, you know, suburban white kid. Like we weren't poor.
Yeah.
I mean, we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. But we always had what we needed, you know?
Yeah, right, right. You
You
never worried about eating dinner, but you also
couldn't.
Couldn't afford to go to the recording studio if mom and dad's done. Like that.
Yeah.
I was the same thing.
Like I remember with that first band, which goes into the DIY thing, was like, all right, like the whole reason why we started the band is like, And it's still to this day, like, I fucking hate the recording studio. Like, it was to play shows. So like, how do we play shows?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we have to throw our own shows. So I didn't know how to do it. So like, I knew that there was a club in Dobbs Ferry called the Embassy Club. It's basically just a community center. I knew that they had a stage, and I knew that playing at the school wasn't cool.
Right.
Like, it was like it's just a talent show or a battle of the bands, like, which didn't exist until we were a band in our town. There was no battle of the bands. There was no bands. I feel like when there was like a band or two in our town, and definitely there was a scene before our scene and before the scene that's now. There's always somebody before. But when you're that age, you don't know any of those people. So it's kind of all new to you. Right. And unless you're very lucky to have somebody show you, we didn't, which is fine. We figured it out. So basically, we knew a local DJ who would DJ the school dances, and he had a PA system. He sold us a PA system for $800, which is so much money at fucking 14 and 12. You know,
but you needed it. You knew you needed it to get the show together. So you're like, yeah. we're going to do it.
Once we got a PA system, we're like, okay, we're going to have a show. Rewind about 6 months before that, we had our first show as a band. I have told the story before on other podcasts, but it's like, we wanted to have a show. So we invited all the people we thought were hot girls and our friends to our drummer's house. Cause like, it's kind of funny. So like, I was friends with everybody. I wouldn't say I was a popular kid, but I was friends with everybody. Yeah. I wasn't part of like a jock group, but I played sports. And I wasn't part of this group, but was doing that. Mm-hmm. The kids in our band, my band members, were like, two of them were like super preppy jockey kids who just like happen to play instruments. And so they invited all the cool kids over to the drummer's house where we practiced. And our first show was very innocent. Like, you know, it was 30 kids in a basement with no PA system. And we just played our original songs and like 20 covers of like Blink and Slipknot and Alkaline Trio and Bouncing Souls and the Ramones, and just sang over our shitty practice amps. Right. And people moshed and sat like cross-legged on the ground for most of the time. And that was the first show. But then we were like, well, we don't want to do this in a basement again. Like, let's do it on the stage. So we got a PA system. And then we were like, how do we get people here? So we made flyers. And then we're like, well, how are we going to get people to come to a band that they don't know? Like, all of our friends will come, right, but nobody else will. So somebody had, I don't know if it was me, but I think we made a joke and we lied. And on the flyer, we put Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell on the flyer. And it said, I'll be there. And it was just a picture of him. It said, I'll be there with the band names. And the bands were like our band, another band. There was a band, Master School. There was a band. And so we got all these people to come. Like, we hung up flyers all over town, like everywhere. Which just because like that was how I knew how to advertise. I didn't know anybody else doing it. Right. I was just like, how do I get the word out? I'm like, oh, when you know, I just thought of like a flyer when you rip a tag off a flyer. And I probably, because my mom owned her own cleaning business, I remember going around a lot with her and hanging up flyers. So I was like, oh, I can hang up flyers like around town and around the neighboring towns. And basically we hung up this flyer that said Mark Paul Gosling, who plays Zach Morris, was going to be there. And fucking like 500-600 people showed up to the first show we ever played, like real show. And
500 people?
500-600 people. Yeah.
It's in your drummer's house?
No. This is afterwards at this Embassy Club thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's still, dude, come on. Like, imagine us now trying to get 500 people.
But it's way different. This is 2000. Right. Everybody is in school still. So you're getting at least like, if my grade alone was, 100 kids in my grade, figure like 40 or 50 of them are going to come. And then like everybody's parents, and then like everybody, the people in my band were 2 grades below. We had friends in the middle grades. So figure you're getting like, and this is a time period where people are into music like this. It wasn't like it was like, like pop punk and this sort of things, or rock bands were like cool. It wasn't like,
and they were on the radio.
And there was no real internet. There was like, there was the internet, but it was AOL. Like, you'd go into a chat room and talk to people. Right. There was no even live journal or dead journal or any of those things yet. Or blogging wasn't really like a thing yet. Like, people didn't have personal pages just yet. It was almost there.
Right.
I think my power is trying to turn off. So hopefully we don't lose you. My computer is so old that if the power goes off, the whole computer goes off.
Nah,
Um,
I guess we'll see what happens.
yeah. Um, so yeah, so it was just like we made our own flyers. I remember going to like Staples and like printing them out because I remember trying to use my home printer, and then we used a school copy machine at the library and got yelled at about that because we were making like thousands of copies of things.
Mm.
And yeah, we had our first show and it was a disaster. It sounded like shit.
Of course, it's not supposed
like our
to
first
be
real
good.
show.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah, our
supposed
first
to
real
be
show.
good, like-
The PA system that we bought, we had it for one day. We did not know how to use it. We had no idea that a power amp had to power the board. And the band that played before us, they had a keyboard and plugged their keyboard into it and fucking blew it up.
Oh man.
So we played, and basically the whole time this PA system had a cutoff for when things peak. So anytime something peaked, it had like a shutdown so that the system wouldn't overload.
Mm.
So like the whole time, everything was so loud because you just played too loud, and the mics just kept cutting out. And it was a good time. Like, and we started doing shows there like once a month, once every other month, until it got kind of old. We're like, oh, we don't want to play here again. So then we kind of expanded out, and that's where we found out about the Lowdown in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
And yeah, it was very DIY, and that's how we found out about more bands. So that's like the beginning of my DIY-ness, from like dirt bike trails to like backyard wrestling to like first band.
Yeah, sick, dude. That's awesome. I mean, I like I said, I think we're all in a lot of ways cut from the same cloth. Everyone that's like in our world, and my story is super like, because we're from the same area. My story is super similar to yours. Like literally recording your first demo at the Dobbs Ferry studio. I'm like, oh, we gotta play a show. I gotta buy a PA system. Like, like it's all the same.
And it's funny too, because like I didn't realize that, like, so later on, when I was doing like my high school internship, like my buddy Paul Scataratico, his dad and his uncle owned the music store, and we moved the music store from Yonkers to Dobbs Ferry. Oh, okay. So they owned two stores. There were Stolen Moments in Dobbs Ferry and the music store in Yonkers. And we went to Yonkers and moved everything there. But that studio had been there forever. And they kind of just like, but they didn't own the studio originally. It was just attached to that Stolen Moments.
It's still there like, too. I passed by that the other day. It's still there.
Dude, 4 years, because I grew up with him. We're in the same grade, and because I was friends with his dad. And even now when I saw his dad, like, you know, like his dad is like in a wedding band. Like for years, I always talked about wanting to fucking turn, because inside there's a huge fucking theater, you know?
Yeah, dude, I took lessons there. So that's where you did like your performance at the end of like the semester or whatever. You did it in that theater.
Who was your teacher?
Jose.
Okay.
His name was Jose. I don't know.
Yeah, so all the teachers were part of. They also Jose. Yeah, I know Jose. All those guys were like, they were all like part of the same wedding band.
Okay.
Like they had like they have such a good racket going on there, and they were also like had a great repairs guy too in that store.
DIY, baby. DIY.
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny because like I'm sure there was other places in our county that like had recording studios, but we just happened to know the same one somehow.
Yeah.
But also like our towns aren't that far apart. When you're a kid, it's super far. Like when you're a kid, like.
Well, I took the lessons on Yonkers Avenue. So I started to, and then when they moved out of Yonkers Avenue, they moved to Dobbs Ferry like full time. So that's why I ended up recording at that studio, because I took the lessons at the place, and then we knew they had a recording studio. And like, not for nothing, like my dad helped us, like our dads helped us pay for it because we were 12. And like. My dad didn't know about recording studio. Like my dad's like, yeah, there's a recording studio at the place you take lessons. You just, if you want to record music, you record music there.
And it's funny too, because like you said, like when you talk to a lot of people about these sort of things, like the stories are similar. I think it's more so like based on the age you are. So and if there's a club in your town. So like I've had these talks with people like in California or in Texas or places that had like a club. Like there was really no club that was doing all ages music.
Nope.
It was kind of like this. And then we found one. There was a place called the Scarsdale Teen Center. And that's where we found out that like other kids who were our same age were, you know, this is by the time you can drive also, like 16, that there was other little areas of Westchester that were doing the same thing. Like they were playing at people's houses and churches, and then it was all very DIY.
Right.
There was no real venues until the Lowdown and then the Haunt and then bars.
Mm-hmm.
But like there was pretty much nothing. And then like the dream was always to play the Chance up in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
Because playing New York City was like, we'll play CBGBs or like eventually we'll do that. And we did, not with that band, but with other bands in high school. But like going to the city was not, or like, I remember the second banders and going to Long Island first show, like out to like where Hofstra is, like Uniondale, right by the Coliseum. Like going, that was like almost like going on tour. We're going to Long Island for like a Friday night. Like it was like, so like, I think it's just like spreading out because you got sick of your hometown, which is totally a pop punk thing. Like, so it's like, let's play other places,
Yeah, I feel you.
Which is funny because like we were even talking about that, me and you, about like playing in our county now, like where there was only, for a little bit, there was only like a couple places to play. And we're like, well, I don't want to play there anymore because we play there all the time.
That's how it is now. That's how
which was like
in 2020. Or well, I guess not really as much in 2020 because there's no shows in 2020. But
right. But like that's
2019.
Like, but that turned into the whole DIY thing of going on tour.
Yeah.
Like I mean, the idea of going on tour beyond the idea of like, oh, it sounded cool and I always wanted to do it, and then finding out like, oh, you have to do it yourself, like and how you do it, to stick with the DIY thing, like. It was only because we wanted to get out of our town and go see other places and play other places. So how do you do that? Was booking it yourself and figuring that out. And we were very lucky because at that point, when I first went on my first tour in 2006, it was like the internet was already a thing. There was websites like Book Your Own Fucking Life, which was like a book before that. And talking to old heads older than me, like the way they booked tours was like, you had to know somebody and call somebody up, or you would call a venue, you would like, or email, or like snail mail places. There was no email or anything like that. So it's funny because it was probably harder and easier at the same time. Because like if something got canceled, you probably wouldn't find out till you got there.
Right.
Whereas
now they're not going to send you an email. Yeah.
Right. So you'd go on tour and things the venue couldn't exist anymore,
Right.
Which is now like we've been on tour and like, they're like, oh, the venue caught fire last night. So the show's canceled.
At least the night before, like.
Yeah, or on your way there.
Right.
not like you got there and the place doesn't exist anymore, which has definitely happened in the early days of touring with our bands. Like we've gotten to places and they just don't exist anymore.
Yeah, word.
When that's our own fault. That's our own fault for not following up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I booked this show 3 months ago. I didn't know it wasn't a place anymore.
Dude, oh yeah, man. For like the first like jukebox tour, a lot of it was like I spoke to you 6 months ago, or we booked it, and like oh, you got we got double booked a lot like that first year, like just like, or you guys can play.
It's all a learning lesson, yeah.
But it was all from doing it ourselves. And it's funny because I tell people now starting bands or people who want to go on tour, who want to hire somebody to book them a tour, it's like the worst idea because like unless it's somebody who's done it a lot, like and you could talk to the bands. I think when we first started, we definitely paid somebody a bunch of money to book us a tour and nothing happens. Or even now, like, having somebody help you book a tour, like you got to do the due diligence yourself. Nothing's going to do it for you unless you're like a bigger band. And even then, even now, and I see it with even big bands now, they have booking agents and the bands themselves are still following up just to make sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things where I've done both. And, I've booked 90% of my tours, and when I say 90%, more than that actually, because I paid someone to book one, and not that it was like I don't think it saved me a lot of time, but I think that the shows could have been better because there's nothing like you really caring about getting the right bands and like doing the like
Well,
and
so
not to say that person
pay
didn't.
Anybody to do that.
Yeah,
like you could pay anybody to do what you just said. Anybody can book a tour, but like it's like
booking a good tour.
And it's like you learn it really early on, or you try to. Like, okay, we just went on tour. We did we did 2 weeks. Like, what places were cool? What places were cool, but we played the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this is a cool town, but we didn't play the punk rock place, or we didn't play the fun place, or we played this place last time, but they got shut down. So now where did all those people go? Like,
right.
And who was your contact? So like, it was always this game, which is like why everybody hates booking tour because we live in such a volatile world where
man.
these places don't exist all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, like, so even now when people ask me, like, Jukebox, we went from touring, like, we started off at like a full summer tour, and then we were touring like, a month on, 2 months off, 2 months on, to heavy touring to like, in the last 2 years, we haven't been doing 150 days on the road. So when people ask me like, oh, who's your contact for here? Like, oh, well, we haven't played there since like 2017. Like,
right.
I don't know if that place exists anymore.
Right.
Like, here's my contact. Like, they might know somebody, but like, if I was to DIY book a tour right now for our band 6 months from now, everywhere would I would say almost everything would probably, unless it's like a legit, and especially now with the coronavirus. I can only imagine if any of those places still exist at all. Any place, even a place that like has money behind it, or like a successful place. Yeah. They might not be able to do anything like that. I got a fucking invite to a show in June down the block at a club in Long Island, and I didn't know if it was a joke or not. June 5th. A show.
That's next week.
I know. I got invited to a show.
I guess I don't know. That's not gonna happen. It's not legally gonna happen.
I don't know. Things are opening up, but like I don't think they're opening up like that.
No, we're phase 1, bro. Phase 1 is 2 weeks, but anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's keep this timeless.
You actually kind of jumped into what I was gonna ask you, which was about touring. So. All right. So was Jukebox the first band you toured with, or was there another band?
No. So the first band I toured with was a band called 42 Grams of Heart Attack.
Okay.
They were based out of Queens. And basically, it was Davey from the band Insecurity, like a New York hardcore punk band.
Yep.
So I only knew him from his band Pipe Bomb Saints. They used to play, they're a Bronx band, but they used to play Bronx underground shows with my old bands, the Pullouts and Future Society.
Okay.
So it's like summer of 2006, and
we've talked about this actually.
Yeah,
I remember this.
And I got a call on my phone that was like, "Hey," and I barely know Davey at the time. Like, we only know each other through going to shows, but not really friends. He's like, "Hey, I have this tour booked. Somebody can't go. You play guitar. Can you play bass? And I know you said you wanted to go on tour before. You just haven't done it yet because I never toured before at that point because my band members were either still in high school because I was in a band with people that were like 2 or 3 years younger, and I was in college at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing weekenders, but we weren't doing tours. Like, we'd go and play like 3 shows. I wouldn't call it a tour. It was like a weekends.
Right.
So I just never had the opportunity or the people to do that with. We had a van. We had all those things to do it. We just didn't do it. So I was like, sure, I have a toothache. It's really bad. Let me find out what's going on. And I went to the doctor, and I had to get emergency root canal surgery. They ripped my tooth out, gave me a bunch of drugs, and I got in the van the next day, and I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody. I got in the van. I was like, hey, what's up? I'm Terry. I'm usually a pretty easygoing guy. I get along with everybody. I might be like a dick for the next like couple days. I just got my tooth pulled really bad. I'm on a bunch of drugs. Like, I've never been on tour before. And none of these people had either. But they were like tough guys from the Bronx, so I felt like I was like the wimp getting involved in all this, and I didn't know anybody. So when you don't know anybody and you're with a group of tough guys, it's very easy to become a target real quick, especially on tour. But that wasn't the case at all. It was a great time. It was the worst book tour ever. It has the most stories out of any tour I've ever been on. It was basically booked like a pentagram. It was booked for like New York to Chicago to Kalamazoo to Ohio, to Virginia, to like it was literally up and down.
That's awesome.
I think somebody just looked on a map and was like, let's go here, here, and here. And then when it got booked, they were just like, oh, cool, these are the shows. Yeah. They didn't think of like, oh, we're going to play a show and then have 3 days off in between before the next show. So it was like it was a 2-week tour that had like 14 days and like 8 shows, and maybe 6 or 7 of them happened. And they were all, and like some of them were just like game time decisions. Like, we're not going there. Like, we can't go there. We don't have any money anymore. Like,
Yeah.
In a van that had a hole on the bottom of the floor that you could pee out the hole. It was just.
I had one of those.
It was crazy. It was so many stories. But like, I was not involved in booking it at all. I was definitely involved in fucking like putting Band-Aids on it while we were out there and problem solving a lot of things. Just like normal things like flat tires and what do you do for this and like that, and like, trying not to call home, like all that sort of shit.
Right.
So it was definitely like an experience, and it didn't scare me away, even though like it probably should have, because I'm not a tough person in many sense, especially at that time.
Yeah.
I was definitely a pushover, like very suburban white kid, like not knowing what he's doing, like in the ghetto somewhere.
I feel you, dude. Dude, I feel like that's the telltale sign though. If you can get through that and then you still want to do it, that means you.
I mean, standing outside the middle of Detroit and being like, I know it's Detroit, I know it's bad, and then legit gunshots happening in front of you, like gang violence, or like get inside and hide, and there's bullets like flying around outside, like shit like that,
It's crazy.
Like transvestite fights, like like huge, like crazy drag queen drug deal gone bad inside the venue. And actually, I think that venue's still around. It's called Now That's Class. It's in Ohio, in Cleveland.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was the first tour, and all the tours since have been pretty much DIY, and everyone is a learning experience. Some of them have been booked by other people with my help, or booked as a team, but doing anything by yourself is pretty rough. So, but I think it all started from like you said back then, like with the first show and making a flyer, like legit, like that's the first step of like finding a place to have a show, and then getting a sound system, and then getting a flyer, like figuring out the flyers. And it's not very much different now, other than there's like a million websites to plug it into to help promote it.
Yeah.
Like there, a lot of stuff like that. And it was always, knowing somebody to help you and who which is life.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's anything, though. That's anything. So, all right. So when you started Jukebox, what year was that? 2000.
Started Jukebox summer of 2008.
2008. Okay, yeah, that makes sense because the 10-year
show. And then our first tour was summer 2009.
Cool. Okay, so did you start Jukebox with the intentions that you were gonna go on tour?
Yes. So when we started Jukebox, there was another band in Westchester called Johnny Giovanni and the Zombie Pit Crew. They were the best Westchester band from like 2002.
That's the Johnny that I know now that plays acoustic.
Chopper. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So they were one of the best. There was like them and the Cleve Agents, and no one in the Somebodies. Those were like I wasn't a huge fan of No One in the Somebodies, but they were like seven brothers and writing really interesting music and super professional. Also, they had brothers that were like in their 20s when everybody else was in their teens, so they had a way bigger connection to like older people and how to do things.
The Cleve Agents, I was such a nerd about. Like, I loved them. Remember that song Black Black Heart?
Yeah,
that was my MySpace song. At one point, like, that was definitely that was the song on my MySpace page for like a while.
Yeah. The Cleve Agents were like Doug and them were like putting on the shows at the White Plains Bowling Alley. Like everybody in a band was like the promoter. So, like we would throw a show, be like, we're throwing a show at the Scarsdale Teen Center. We're gonna have the Cleve Agents play and this and that, and like so. Basically, the Cleve Agents and Johnny Giovanni, the Zombie Pit Crew, and No One is Somebody's, and maybe like, I think that's probably it. We're like the three bands that you were like, if you were throwing a show, you wanted their bands to play because you were gonna have the best turnout. Mm-hmm. Loser 44 and The Others Gone Wrong.
Yeah. Oh, so, and then they became Longspur.
So those five bands in our county were like the bands that were either like pop punk or punk rock or weird art punk. Like those were like the bigger bands, or bigger. Everybody was the same size band.
Right.
Nobody was touring. Nobody was like a huge band. But like in the eyes of people showing up, they had the best songs. They played the tightest, and they wrote the best songs, and they had the best crowd reaction. So
those are the bands I looked up to for sure.
Right. So I had just finished. Like I stopped doing the 42 grams of heart attack thing. Because it wasn't really my band. I was joined the band. My buddy Nate joined the band, and everybody was really into drinking, and everybody in that band was a hardcore alcoholic. And I was the only one who was 21. So we were going to shows. I was buying everybody beer. Everybody was getting fucked up in the van, and then I was the one doing everything, loading in, loading out, cleaning up the mess, and then driving everybody home. Right. So it got old real quick. Um, and so I left that band. I was like, I want to start a band that's like a real band, a band that like everybody has the same goals, everybody's on the same page, which is like the hardest part about being in a band. So when I called up Seth and Malarkey, and I was like, the original guitarist and bass player at Jukebox, and I was like, hey, I want to start a band, and I want to be I want it to be your guys' band. Like, I know that Chopper, Johnny Giovanni, at the time, he wasn't really doing music. He was in acting school.
Okay.
And didn't want to do the band thing. And like, I love Chopper to death, and he will not take offense to saying this. He's a huge flake. Back then way more like a huge airhead. Like he would just be very aloof and lost and not show up and not do things only because like that's just who he was. Not because he's malicious or he was ill intent. It's just like he was unreliable about being in a band. Like their band didn't even have a last show. It kind of just fizzled out because Chopper was unreliable. And they were like in college and all doing things like that. So I called them up. I was like, would you want to start a band? But it's got to be a real band, like a band that like we practice a lot, like 2-3 times a week,
right,
with the intent of touring. Like, and we have goals. Like, so basically it was me, Seth, and Mike, and Joe, which was the original drummer, bass player, and guitar player of Johnny Giovanni. So it's basically the Zombie Pit Crew without Johnny Giovanni.
Got it.
And with me playing rhythm guitar. But I didn't want to sing because I had been singing in street punk bands and Future Society before that. And like, I was never, and still am not, like super like into my own voice. Like I hate the way I sound. Not that I can't sing, but like I know that there are better singers than me, and I have no shame of saying that. So and at the time, all I wanted to do was run around and play guitar and do harmonies and backup vocals.
Got it.
So we tried out our friend Matt, who became our merch guy for the first year, singing, and he was terrible, but a good person. And then I had been writing music in college with Chris, our original singer, and he was like in a big ska band, like a 17-person ska band with like John Ryan and all those guys. Like
was that Tsunami Bomb?
Not Flaming Tsunamis.
Oh, Flaming Tsunamis. Sorry, I'm thinking.
It was another band called the Vagabonds.
Okay.
And I'm sure they were made up of members of 100 bands now.
I remember like that name too.
Probably like Bomb the Music Industry and all those bands because it's Long Island. And there were 17 people in the band, so at least half of them are doing something else in the scene now. So we started the band with the four of us and then trying out Chris. And we liked the way Chris sounded. We were going to do ska punk in the beginning. It was punk with a little bit of ska, kind of like Rancid. Like, because those guys really loved Rancid. And I really loved like Bouncing Souls and Against Me and Alkaline Trio.
Cool.
And Chris was really into ska. And so it kind of just worked out that way. And the intent was like, we were going to tour within a year, put out a record, and like get signed and do Warped Tour. Like those were the main goals was like have fun, tour a lot, travel the world, try to do Warped Tour and get signed like by an independent label.
Yeah.
Like something that would help us at least. And that was August of 2008 that we finalized the lineup. We had a demo done we used to practice at a barn called Woody's House. Fred Gillen Jr. He is huge in the Westchester folk scene. He does like the Clearwater tour where they like clean up the Hudson River. He does a lot of stuff up in the Peekskill area. He has a beautiful barn turned into a studio.
Oh,
amazing
cool.
place.
Where's that?
In Cortland, Peekskill, Croton area.
Got it.
Which is like where all the guys from the band were from, besides me and Chris. And we practiced there, but then we recorded a demo there. And then after that, we did the first record. We recorded the record, and I think we had just the demo at the time. We played a show in Connecticut at this place called Snapper McGee's, and it was a fucking disaster. 5-piece, guitar amp blue, and then bass amp blue. Second song in. Now there's a lot of people at the show too. There's like probably like 150 people inside this bar venue. Bass amp blue, like second song in. So guitar player sits down, bass player sits down. Then I'm just there with my guitar, drummer and singer. So there's three of us. Two guys are sitting out. And it was kind of like we were real down. And I was just like, fuck it. And I was like, guys, get on stage. So like everybody whose equipment exploded got on stage and everybody just started singing along and starting mosh pits while we were trying to save this set with just guitar, drum, and singer. So then we did that. It turned like, lemons into lemonade. And which I only made that reference because I got this giant lemonade thing.
Hey, there you go.
Summertime vibes. And it was a disaster. Complete disaster turned into like not a disaster. People had fun. There was people moshing. We saved it in the last 2 songs.
That's awesome.
Well, the guy who was there watching us, this older guy named Travis, he owned the bar, and we had no idea at the time that he owned Altercation Records and a magazine. So he was like, "Hey, like that was something." And we're like, "What?" He's like, "How old are you guys? Like, how long have you guys been in a band?" Like, not even a year. Like, not a year. And he's like, okay. He's like, most bands would have just done what you did at first, which is like sit out and mopey and like let the set get ruined. And like, you guys kind of saved it. And that's super professional. So I have a record label and let's talk. So then
That's
a
awesome.
month later, we met up at a diner and just talked about what we wanted to do as a band and what he could do and what he does do. And he had bands at the time, Born to Lose, which is like a big band out of Texas. And basically they had connections to Warped Tour and pressing and all these things that we didn't want to pay for and that we were looking for, like literally what we were looking for. And we were like, we looked at it, we had a lawyer look at it, and we were, happy with it. And that's how we got signed to our first like independent label because
Isn't that funny?
we turned shit into like something good.
Yeah,
and it was just because like, and until this day, I tell everybody that now, even like you never know who's in the crowd. Even when there's fucking 4 people at your show, one of those 4 people could be somebody influential or looking to give you a break or know somebody.
Yeah.
So like, give it your all, and especially with what's going on in the world today, you never know when your last show is going to be. So you might as well fucking rip it up and have a good time because that could be the end at that point.
Bro, did you think I didn't think my last show was gonna be in Arkansas before all this? Great time.
No.
Shout out Arkansas. But you're right. It's like, and that's crazy too. Like you're like, oh, that was like the worst show we ever played. It's like, but that show just led to you playing Warped Tour and like putting out records on a record label and like, like that one show that you thought was the worst show ever.
That one show led to magazines, interviews,
right?
Like everything, music videos, like all this shit that we didn't pay for.
Right.
Like
100%.
That was still very DIY. I mean, it wasn't like they were a big label with a lot of money.
Of course, yeah.
And a lot of things that we learned later on were like things that we had to pay back. Like royalties and shit like that.
Oh, I owe you that? I thought you were just giving us that.
I thought you were just giving us all these T-shirts for tour. I thought they were like a gift, So, and which is funny too, because like I went to school for music business, so like I knew that shit was coming, and like it was not a surprise, when that sort of stuff happened, because like I was finishing up, when we started the band, I was in my junior year of college, so we were like went on tour. The first real tour was like the summer college ended. So, and the other guys were already out of college. Like they were already older, like working already.
Cool.
So, but yeah, and the very still DIY. Once that label thing happened, it was very much like, oh, we're shooting a video, but like you guys got to do everything. And like, do you know a video guy? Like, so it's like, we'll pay for a video, but you got to find all these people.
Right. You got to do the work. We'll just we'll give you the cash. Cool.
Yeah. So it was like,
and Altercation was out of. It was out of Texas.
They're out of New York and Texas. So,
yeah, that's what I thought.
So one of the guys was from like the Kingston area, and the other guy is from like that area also. JT, he's a comedian. He moved to Austin and started like the Austin chapter of the label.
Got it.
And he would deal with all the Texas bands, and Travis would work with all like the Northeast bands.
Cool.
And they were like the ideal, like, and like any record label and anything, like you're gonna have a good relationship with them, and then there'll be good times and bad times. And they were like the perfect label for a band for what we were looking to do and stepping up to, when we wanted to reach for higher things, they tried to help us reach higher. They even shopped us out to other labels when we were like ready to move on from them.
Wow.
And like, for other bands that we were friends with who were like guys who were older who couldn't really tour as much, you know, they were happy to be on a label that would allow them to do band things without having to be like a super active band. So like, you know, a label is only going to help a band as much as a band is willing to help themselves.
Right.
So unless you're being put out on tour by like a huge label that's paying for everything and forcing you to do things, like an independent record label can't really force you to do anything. And it's only and I feel like most bands only who get signed to the smaller labels are bands that are going to work for it.
Right.
You know, and they're good bands. You know, you got to have the chops and the songs. And the work ethic. If you don't have work ethic, no one's gonna sign you.
You gotta be the band that when your guitar amp and your PA shit the bed, you still keep going.
Yeah, which is like, dude, which is why I tell people now, even too, like when people are like, oh, how do we get a booking agent? Like, we don't have a booking agent. We have one, but she doesn't do anything. She like tries to get us on things. She's like, but it doesn't. We basically do everything ourselves. Right. In America. In Europe, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But big like music agencies, like most of the time they'll sign a band that already has a track record of doing everything themselves. They want like a sure thing.
Yeah, man.
So they want to know like, oh, like you've been on tour before? Okay, like and you've had some moderate success doing it. Okay, then maybe we'll book a tour for you. Yeah. No one's gonna be like, oh, you've never been on tour before? Like, unless you were like
very rare. Sometimes
unless you were like unless you're super good looking and write super amazing songs, or you have like that it factor where you could just look at a band and be like, this band is great, and they just are waiting to be found. You know, for every band like that, I've met thousands of bands that are way better than my band ever was that deserve to be doing all the things that we got to do. They just haven't met the right people yet, and maybe they just haven't decided to leave their hometown. They're like, you know,
dude, it's one of those things where you hear people go sometimes like, well, that's so lucky that you got signed to that label. It's like, bro, this was not luck. Like, I just worked for this, or like,
no. It's like
it's almost never.
It's 80% hard luck. Like it's like 80% hard work. Fucking like 80% fucking like good luck, and then 20% just like, you know, work ethic. I don't know. It's like a shit ton of luck and a shit ton of working. It's not gonna just
but like it's like the luck I feel like is so much like it's
well,
not.
You have to set yourself up for luck.
Yeah, which isn't luck. Like it's like dude, I came across this you came across that opportunity with Altercation Records because you were at that show doing the thing that time. Which you could say that's luck, but it's like, no, I put the show together and I work and I play shows.
All the work that led up to it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And it's you know, it's setting yourself up to be available for that luck too.
Yeah.
So another quick story about that and like things like Warped Tour with that sort of thing. We were just talking to that label. We were barely signed to that label. We have been signed with them for a little bit, but nothing was really happening. You know, it takes a long time to get going. Like things take time, press and all that sort of shit, to like push a release. They had another band set up to go on Warped Tour. They had two different bands that were splitting the dates on Warped Tour. And the other band was like, we can't do it. Like somebody can't get off of work. So they asked us next. So like, if we weren't ready to be like, yeah, we have a van, we can go. Like it's only 2 months. It's only a month away. Like we can take off of work, or we can quit our jobs. We can do those things, make those sacrifices, or be available for the luck. You know, that's how that works. Like you can only be so lucky, but if you're not lucky enough to take it, if you're not prepared, you have to be prepared for the luck.
Dude, anyone, but it's that, right? But it's like anyone that is in a place where they're doing really well or they're successful, like it's like 9.9% of those people just worked really hard and something pushed through for them. You gotta do the work to. It's like you can say it's luck, but it's like it's really not luck. It's like you just keep working, and like the more you work and the more you put yourself in the place to be to get the opportunities, you're gonna get the opportunity.
Right, and so I was talking to a buddy in OC45 about this. There was one year where we played with them like all over Europe, and we played a festival together in Canada. and then in Florida. Then our tours crisscrossed in California, and then in Washington. So we had seen them more than I see like some of my family and best friends. And we were talking in Washington. I was like, Washington State. I was like, dude, this is crazy. Like we because of music and what we do, like we've gotten to hang out all over the world this year. And like I don't know a lot of people who could say that. And
Yeah.
somebody in their band was like, we're very lucky to do this. And somebody else in their band corrected him. He's like, we're not lucky. It's like we worked really hard to get these shitty opportunities to like do these things. And nothing we've done is because of luck. It's because of hard work and the little bit of luck or like things that worked into place because of the hard work we did.
Yeah.
You know, we're not lucky by any chance. Like we've made more sacrifices than most people. We have terrible relationships with our families or trust issues with girlfriends. You know, maybe drinking problems. Can't hold down jobs, not available. Like for things like that. Like when you're touring as much as we were doing at the time, you're really not desirable as a human outside of being in a band.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I was very lucky to have good relationship with my jobs. And then when I figured out like, oh, being a bartender and working in the music industry will allow me to do these things because they allow you to leave and come back.
Yeah.
You know, no 9-to-5 job really allows you to do that.
No.
Now in the world we live in now, you know, some of the guys in the band, they were, you know, working from the road. Everybody was working from the road at one point besides me. So that just shows you because they were willing to put in the hard extra work and work from the road, their jobs saw how hard they worked at their job and at the band. Their jobs were like, yeah, you can go on tour for a couple weeks, 3 weeks, you know, or you got this great opportunity to do something like this tour with this band, or like, of course you can, because you as people, if you are a hard worker and you put in work ethic, then you might get that luck of your boss letting you take off for 3 weeks.
Right.
But you didn't really take off. You still worked from the road as best as you could.
Yeah.
You know, because they're happy to have somebody on their team that has a passion and that is like willing to do that. Now, not every job's like that, and definitely takes a certain situation and tenure to get there. But it is possible to do, especially in the world of music today, where I don't really know too many bands who just are musicians. Most people have another side gig.
You have
being a recording studio or something else DIY, a t-shirt company, or any other means of making money. So I think if you work hard, then I think your companies, depending on what they are, if they're not like fucking financial miserable companies, like terrible companies to work for, corporate companies, like I worked for a sporting goods store, a bullshit retail job at one point. Like they're not going to give a fuck I'm going on tour. So I was like, all right, well, I'll see you later. Like, you know, like this isn't my career. So like that sort of thing, you know, it's all about your work ethic and not to say that you always get recognized for it either. Like not everybody gets recognized. There are millions of bands or millions of people who are better graphic designers or artists or anything that they do. They just haven't met the right people yet and been lucky enough for it. Doesn't mean they're not working hard. I know we're talking about a lot of hard work and do-it-yourself stuff, but there is a lot of luck involved. There's just as much luck in the equation as there is hard work.
Yeah, and I think, but again, that comes back to if you're not doing the work and you're not putting yourself out there, that luck factor is not coming. Like really, like if you're just gonna sit home and put out a record once a year or once every 2 years and be like, oh, I hope this works out. It's like that's not if you got in your van 150 days out of the year, there's a lot more potential that you're gonna meet that person that you're gonna do that thing.
Right, because you're putting yourself. You have to put yourself out there for extend your network. You know, and that sort of thing. But it also depends on like, you know, I'm like I am now in my life a very goal oriented person. I wouldn't say I set like huge goals or or like I make a lot of lists in my head in the morning and try to tackle certain things.
Yeah.
But when we started the band, and if we're talking about the band, you know, it was very much like we're doing this because we all want to do this, and this is the work we're going to put into it. Now, over the years, I'm the last original guy, and that's not because everybody didn't want to put in that work anymore. It might be because somebody was like their priority might have changed to like, I want to, you know, spend more time with family, or I don't want to be poor anymore and on the road, or like they got everything out of it they wanted to. They got to tour and make friends and play 48 states. But they knew that the band and the idea of the band and what I wanted to do and what we originally wanted to do was to tour and put out quality stuff and be professional about things. So once people realized that they couldn't do that anymore, it was not like any sort of like, well, go find other people who can fill our shoes. Like they're not replaceable. Like everybody who's ever been in our band, which is not many people, there's like the first version of our band and then like the version now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like everybody had the same. It was like when you joined the band, you had to know that this is why you were joining the band. So like we started the band one way, and then when Norm joined, it was like, hey Norm, like you're a promoter, like you work really hard at that. Like you do your punk versus fibrosis thing. You are barely a drummer. Like Norm barely played drums when he joined the band. Like he didn't know how to do anything drum wise, and like he might deny that now, but like he didn't know what a 4 count was or anything was music wise, but he knew how to play drums. Kinda. He played drums in his past. Now he's disgusting at his drums because we worked really hard at it. But when he joined the band, he knew he was joining a band that was going to be touring a lot. Same thing with Bob. Bob joined the band because he wanted to be in a band that toured. He was never in a band with people that he could do that with. So a lot of doing, a lot of anything in your life, when it's a business or a partnership or, whatever you're doing, if you surround yourself with other people who are either like-minded or not like-minded, which is the case in our band right now, is we are very different people, but for the most part, everybody's work ethic is pretty high, or they have high standards at least.
Yeah.
So if you're opening up a business, like I might want to open up a business with my friend because he's my friend and he's like a great chef, let's say. And I always wanted to open up a bar, music venue, and he's a chef. But I know that like he is a terrible business person, but he's a great chef. Oh, that might be good for that aspect of it, but like I can't count on him to do certain things like that. So like when you're doing things, and especially in the DIY world, if you have that work ethic of doing it yourself, then you will set yourself up around other people who are willing to work just as hard. Yeah. Or you're totally okay with doing everything yourself, and you have to know that going into it. Then I guess I'm doing everything, which sometimes happens in businesses and bands. There's always gonna be somebody who's doing more, and you kind of have to be okay with that. If you're that person, you could hold a grudge for a while and be like, I'm doing everything, and eventually either then stop doing it. If you don't want to do it, stop being the person who does everything, and maybe somebody will step up. Or fucking, if this is what you want to do, then you got to do it. It's part of the work, and that's just how it is. It's not always the 25, 30, 40 minutes on stage.
Yeah,
it's everything around it.
100%. I think that more than like the saying "do it yourself," I think doing it for yourself is really important, because if you're doing it because you love it and you do it because like there's no other real reason behind it. Like there could be the reason of like you start a band, like you say, you start a band because you want to have fun and you want to go on Warped Tour and you have goals. Like, oh, I could take this to this way. I'm doing this podcast because like it could go this way or it could, right? But realistically, like, I'm doing this because I want to have conversations with my friends about doing
100%.
You're doing it for yourself in the sense of like, you're like, I could put this out and people might like this and might enjoy this, but is that why I'm doing this?
Well, you're doing it because it's fun.
I'm doing it because I want to do it for myself.
I mean, if we go back to like my original story, I only picked up a guitar because it looked fun.
Exactly.
Running around on stage looked fun. Yeah. Had nothing to do with music itself. I mean, it did, but I didn't know at the time.
Exactly.
It just looked fun. Same thing with the wrestling thing. Like, I didn't want to be a pro wrestler. It just looked fun, and I was hanging out with other people having fun. Now, the same people I started that first band with and the wrestling thing with, we have a podcast now. We started a podcast 5 years ago called The Rude Dude Cast, and I'll plug it real quick. It's at The Rude Dude Cast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/Rude Dude Cast. We are live every Wednesday on Twitch at 1 p.m. and then it goes up on YouTube, whatever. Nice. Doesn't matter. It all started because 5 years ago, my original band people, the original wrestling people, old school friends, we started writing music again together. We were writing lo-fi music just on a computer, and we were calling it the BFB. It's the Best Friends Band. We were writing songs because we were best friends and we were having fun just hanging out. Then the idea was, all right, well, like I knew a lot of people from the music community. So I was like, oh, we can have my buddy Kyle sing on a song, and then we could have Chopper sing on a song, and we could have Lauren from American Pinup sing on a song, and we get all of our favorite singers to sing on these songs, and it'll be the best friend band. We'll play one show with everybody there, and then we'll break up and never do it again. So then after that, when we started doing that, we had like 20 songs written in like 4 weeks, and I was like, you know what? Like, I already have a band. I already do all my energy into a band. Like I'm very much one band, one mind person. Like, if I'm going to be in a band, it's going to get it my all. Now, that might be for everybody because some bands work differently, and that's totally cool. But for me, it was always like, I'm going to be on one band and focus. So I was like, why don't we start a podcast? I listen to a lot of podcasts. So we started a podcast specifically to talk about the things that we like to talk about when we're just hanging out.
Right.
And if people listen to it, that's cool. We did some Facebook advertising. We got some ads on other podcast show. We have a small listenership. We stopped for 2 years, and because of the coronavirus, we came back and do it, remotely. We used to do it together, and then we did it, now we do it through the internet, which is fine. But we still only do it because it's fun. We never and it's an excuse to hang out. There might be things that we do to grow our audience, but it's never with the goals in mind of becoming a famous podcast. But that's because that's how we set out from the beginning.
Right.
If we set out from the beginning of like, oh, we want to grow this podcast and be a huge podcast, we used to put a lot of production into the podcast. We used to have fake commercials. We'd have sound effects. We had a lot of post-production that took a lot of time. When then we realized like, it doesn't make what the show is. The show is just the three of us talking or the two of us talking, like all the bells and whistles or whatever. Like, let's not make it so much of a job and let's just have fun. We already have enough of that stuff. But if we wanted to, and we came into it with that idea, then we would put the work in to do that. But we only put in as much effort as we want to, because then it becomes a job, and it's not supposed to be that because it's just a podcast with my friends, and it's not the band. Whereas the band is kind of like a job, but it's treated as like a fun, hobby that makes money. It's a business, but it's treated as such, but it's fun, and it's fun. And it's fun from the beginning. It was fun. And with the idea of we're doing all these things, going on tour, doing the stuff because it's what we want to do and because it's fun. Once we don't want to do it anymore or it's not fun, then either jump off the bus or get out of the van and let everybody continue on. Or if everybody's on the same page of let's slow down because it's 10 years later or, things change over time, that's cool too. As long as it's still everybody's on the same page and communicating, and it's fun. And I feel like that's with anything, especially in the DIY world, because you're putting your time, your money, your effort into it. It's got to be fun, and you got to be getting something out of it. And if you're not, then don't do it.
100%. If the day I feel unmotivated to do things is the day I stop doing them.
Yeah.
Like, it's how you got to be. Like, that's what leads to the idea of burnout, and you don't want to burn out. If you're doing stuff because you want to do it because it makes you happy and you enjoy it. And that's why. And don't put I think we all do this, but don't, like, try not to put too much pressure on anything. Like, it doesn't, like, a podcast doesn't have to be the best the first episode. Just do it and then put it out and then see what happens and then just keep doing it.
The pressure you speak about is your own personal pressure.
It's all up here, and it doesn't have to be. It
is to an extent, but when you start doing something for a lot of time and you put a lot of hours into something, you might feel pressure. Like, I feel pressure from the outside world about our band. When are you doing this? Like, oh, you guys were in the studio. What happened? Why didn't you finish? My dad is super business. He's like, what's going on with the band? Did you make any money? Did you do this? Like, he's very business side of it. Or it's like, my mom is always like, oh, are you still having fun doing what you're doing? Are you traveling? Like, there is very much outside pressures. But you have to make sure that you're allowing yourself to receive that pressure and push it away or push it out or take it in and use it towards whatever you're doing.
100%.
But it has to be because you like and love what you're doing. If you don't like it, then there's other things you can be doing that you might like and that you could try. which is why I'm a big fan of trying new things all the time.
Try it.
Which is why I'm happy that you're trying doing a podcast.
I'm giving it a go, dude.
You might not, everybody's like I say it about ours podcast too. Like we're not the best, we're not the first. When it's whatever. Same thing with being in a band. We're not the best, we're the first, but we're ourselves, and we're doing what we're doing. And so that's all you can do. And you can have fun and work hard at it, or work as much at it as you want to work at it. There's no pressure involved, unless you want to do those things. I think that's what people forget. A lot of, especially when it comes to bands, and especially DIY bands, a lot of bands will be like, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And it's like, just do it.
That's it.
How do I do that? I'm gonna just do it. It's like, it'll take some work, or you might fail, but you got to do it to do it. No one's going to do it for you, and you have to do it your way, and you have to do it yourself and be yourself while you're doing it.
Wow, dude, you just said the podcast name in your statement. But
I know I've done this. I've done this before. I'm giving you sound bites.
Well, I think on that note, we're at like an hour 20.
I told you.
I think we're gonna leave it on that. You and I can sit here and talk for 3 hours, but
I told you. I told you hour 20.
I'll just have you back if that's cool.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'd love to be back. I'm happy. I'm very honored to be the first one on this.
Thank you for doing it again, man.
Thank you for having me. I wish you many success. Yeah, it was fun. I always like hanging out, and I don't think I'll ever get used to just the Zoom life right now. I really miss hanging out with people, but talking to you, and it was very easy. And I wish you many luck, and with all your future guests. Happy to send you guests. Happy to see who you have on that's not in the music world, or might be in a different form of art or business or other sorts of creativity. And it's a pleasure being your friend and working with you in this world. I think the power's trying to go out.
Likewise, bro. I love you, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just end the recording.
Wait, let me spit out my socials.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry. I gotta. All right. I'm gonna make it.
Gotta get used to this stuff.
I'll probably edit this out. All right. Yeah. All right.
No, dude. The key of all this shit is not editing as much.
All right. We're not editing any of this. You're gonna hear all of it. Terry.
No, it just makes your life easier. You don't want to edit everything.
Terry, hit us. Go with your socials, and I'll leave with a song out, and you can just pick which song we play out.
Cool. What's up? It's been awesome being on Be Yourself, Do It Yourself, episode 1. I'm Terry from the Jukebox Romantics and the Rude Cast. You can find all of our stuff. Just Google the Jukebox Romantics or jukeboxromantics.com. And then with the Rude Cast, it's Twitter and Instagram at the Rude Cast. We're live every Wednesday on Twitch at twitch.tv/man_Deronius. It's really weird. Since we took a break, my co-host of the Rude Cast, he has become a Twitch streamer. He's got tons of followers. So we molded both worlds of just me, our podcast, rating his stream. So it's just that, twitch.tv/man_Deronius, or just, Google and YouTube, the Rude Cast. It's up on YouTube the day after, every Wednesday around 1 p.m. We do it live. It's also wherever you can find podcasts, iTunes, all that shit. And take care of each other, be safe, and be yourself, and do it yourself.
Yeah, man. All right. You better be listening to the Jukebox Romantics. What song are we playing?
You can play Sun's Out, Buns Out.
Sun's Out, Buns Out. All right,
It's summer.
We're playing Sun's Out, Buns Out. All right, dude. Thanks again. I love you, man. And
Peace.
Peace.
Be safe.
All right, cool. Oh, man.